Most characters in Honkai Star Rail have abilities that are pretty easy to understand, at least in the context of the lore itself. Jingyuan can summon a giant lightning lord because of the powers granted to him by Lan. Serval generates electricity and lightning through her instrument, and Himeko has a personal orbital satellite she uses to rain fire on her enemies. Each of them have some semi-realistic source of their power, and even those that overlap with seemingly supernatural abilities can be somewhat understood. However, Silverwolf is a rather unique oddity. How exactly does she hack reality? Isn't that almost infringing on the ability to manipulate reality itself? That's what we'll be discussing in detail in this video. Before we dive into it though, if you want to see more Honkai Star Rail content, do consider subscribing to the channel. As unique as the ability to rewrite reality is on paper, this isn't an ability that is exclusive to Silverwolf. She's just really good at it. The origins of this ability actually comes from the planet Silverwolf is from, Punklorde, where many talented hackers reside. Punklorde is a rather interesting planet as it's said to be made out of data and symbols. It's unclear whether this means that the location is purely digital in nature or a planet made of data that occupies physical space, but nevertheless, the reality hacking we hear of originates from this location. According to Screwlum, a group resides on this planet that is currently compiling the languages, thoughts, and even emotions of the entire planet into symbols in an attempt to uncover a particular truth. What this truth is, Screwlum doesn't go into further detail, but I suspect it has something to do with the paths and the eons, as they are nothing more than a collection of ideals, beliefs, and actions that originate from sentient and intelligent species. This collection of information is suspected to be condensed into a line of code. Essentially, this particular group of hackers are looking to distill the information of reality itself into a line of code that would be easier to interpret. Screwlum also mentions that as a line of code, everything and anything related to an individual, animal, or object is able to be discerned as this length of code dictates what the entity itself comprises of. So on a grander scheme, the hackers of Punklorde are trying to decipher the universe through this method. The culture of the planet also adheres to what is called as Punklorde mentality, which views the universe as a game to be completed. It's likely that the pursuit of this truth is just another attempt at this so that they can move on to the next level, whatever that may be. This approach of converting every piece of information in reality into a line of code is likely what gives these hackers the insight into how things work within the physical reality. Being from this area and largely growing up here, this is most likely how Silverwolf learned the ability to hack and change reality itself, but how exactly is it done? Well, this is where it gets a little bit confusing and involves some assumptions on my part, so keep that in mind. So throughout our time with Silverwolf in the main story, we've seen her display three distinct abilities. The first is just rudimentary hacking, like those keyboard spamming stuff you see in movies. The second is the ability to teleport herself or others to different locations. And the last is seemingly the changing of reality itself. Her hacking abilities are pretty self-explanatory. Having originated from Punklorde, she likely was exposed to this skill set and picked it up throughout her time there. Even Herta, who is from the Genius Society and one of the smartest people in the entire universe, did not underestimate her or any of the hackers from Punklorde, showing how skilled they are in this area. So it stands to reason that sometime in her past, Silverwolf must have learned the skills of a hacker during her time in Punklorde. Now the next two abilities are a bit more complicated to explain, so just bear with me and my tinfoil hat. Earlier in the video I mentioned that a group exists on Punklorde that is working towards translating the physical objects, people included, into lines of code and data. We also learned from Screwlum that the graffiti that Silverwolf has left all around the space station isn't just random acts of vandalism, but rather they can act as two-way data tunnels which Silverwolf can use and track. So my idea of how this works is that much like the group Screwlum mentions in Punklorde, Silverwolf is able to condense or change any person or object into a line of code. And using the data tunnels she has set up ahead of time to move them and change them back to physical objects. This is what allows Silverwolf to appear as though she is reprogramming reality itself, but in truth, all she is doing is converting things into code which she can manipulate and then changing it back. An ether cartridge seems to assist with this process. Based on how it's described, an ether cartridge can hold a vast amount of information. I assume that the more information and understanding of a particular data type you have, the more options you have at your disposal to practice this hacker magic. I would even go so far as to say, without such information, Silverwolf may in fact have to painstakingly understand and convert whatever she wishes to manipulate into its line of code first, before being able to manipulate it. Think of it like this. Each object, person, and item in the world can be interpreted as a recipe of sorts, and the ether cartridge, especially the one in the story, is a whole cookbook of them. Without understanding what each object's line of code is, manipulation is likely not possible or probably very difficult. Having such a thing would limit the amount of work she would need to do in order to achieve the same results, and why she is so keen on obtaining it, as we see in her companion story. Even Herta uses this particular cartridge to model her simulated universe, indicating the wealth of information it contains. Screwlum also says that ether editing isn't something that can destroy an entire universe, in this case the simulated one, meaning that an incomprehensible amount of information and understanding is required to achieve that. And since no one has a complete understanding of the universe, this will just be naturally impossible. Finally, in the very beginning of the story, we see Silverwolf storing and retrieving the main character in some digital space, before Kafka shoves the Stellaron in them. All of this seems to point at the idea that Silverwolf is merely converting physical objects and individuals into code, which she can then manipulate. It's likely that this is how her abilities work as well when she implants a weakness or reduces defense of her target. She likely is tweaking their code and turning them back into physical beings or something like that. On the surface, powers like this may seem pretty broken, but I suspect that much like Welt's own abilities, Silverwolf and the hackers of punklorde need to fully understand what it is they try to manipulate before they can do it. Without detailed information, it likely limits their ability to carry out this ether editing. I also assume that ether mentioned here is the building blocks of reality itself, and how they are able to accomplish this by understanding the ether makeup of an object or an individual. So the method in which she accomplishes this reality manipulation seems to be via ether editing, though the details of it we don't currently know in full. Silverwolf's view is much like those on punklorde, as she views the world as nothing but a game, but the purpose of a game is to have fun, and as such, she does anything really just purely for enjoyment. This is evident in how Screwlum and Herta chose to deal with her by simply not playing her game and enabling her. And of course, banning all her accounts. While her abilities may appear godlike even within the context of the lore, in truth, they are understandable if you think about it, and there are limitations to what they can do. If they really could just edit the universe however they wished, I doubt the universe could continue to exist as it does with such people present. Now keep in mind that most of this is just conjecture and theoretical. It's how I think much of this works based on what we know, so take it with a huge bucket of salt. As the story evolves, things might change and the explanation may vary from what I theorize here. With that though, I'll end the video, and if you enjoyed watching it, do consider liking and subscribing to the channel, and I'll see you in the next one. As usual, have a nice day.